I was there, not in the trenches, not in the tanks. I was behind the wheel of a 2.5-ton GMC CCKW truck, my hands oil-stained and my eyes burning with exhaustion. My name doesn't matter, just as it didn't matter to the generals planning battles on their clean, impeccable maps. But I'll tell this story because someone needs it. Because while Patton was making headlines as he tore through France like a hurricane of steel, we were on the roads. And without us, that hurricane would have died before it even began. August 1944. Normandy had been conquered with blood and sacrifice. The Germans were retreating, but they weren't broken. Not yet. They knew how to play the strategic retreat game better than any army in the world. Every kilometer they retreated was another kilometer our trucks had to travel. Every bridge they blew was a severed artery in our supply line. They didn't need to defeat us on the battlefield. They just needed to run us out of gas. I grew up in Alabama, the son of sharecroppers who worked land that wasn't ours. My father taught me to drive before I was 12. Old Ford tractors that choked on the mud of the cotton fields. When war came, I didn't think twice. It wasn't about patriotism exactly. It was about being seen, about mattering. In 1943, America, a black man might not walk through the front door of a restaurant, but he could drive a truck to save Europe. The irony wasn't lost on me. The army assigned me to Platoon 3348 Quartermaster Company. I quickly learned that quartermaster was a fancy word for those who do the dirty work no one wants to talk about. While the infantry received their decorations and the pilots became heroes in the newspapers, we carried ammunition, gasoline, rations, medicine, everything that kept an army alive. And we learned something the Germans were about to discover the hard way. In modern warfare, whoever controls the road controls the destiny. I met James Jimmy Porter at Camp Lee, Virginia, during basic training. He was from Detroit, having worked on Ford's assembly lines before the war. He knew engines like I knew the land. We were different. He was fast-talking, energetic, always with a joke ready. I was quieter, more observant, still carrying the slow rhythm of the South. But on the roads of France, those differences cease to matter. When you're driving through pitch darkness with no lights, the sound of artillery in the distance, and your heart pounding in time with the gear shifts, you don't see color, you see brothers. And then there was Sergeant Mackenzie, white Irish from Philadelphia. He had fought in World War I on the same roads we were now traveling again. He had returned home with a stiff leg and nightmares that never left him. When World War II began, he could have stayed home. He was too old, he had already served his part. But he enlisted again, this time not to shoot, but to command. "Someone has to keep you alive," he said on his first day, and he kept that promise fiercely. The first days after Normandy were almost peaceful. We drove the roads of liberated France, seeing villages where children waved and women threw flowers. I thought war would be like this: liberation, gratitude, victory. I was naive. Jimmy was too. We all were. The first bomb fell on a Tuesday. I didn't see it coming, no one does. I just felt the world explode in light and noise. The truck in front of me simply disappeared in a column of orange fire. I slammed on the brakes so hard I nearly flew through the windshield. Debris rained down around me, twisted metal, burning wood, and things I didn't want to identify. "Get off the road! Get off the road!" Mackenzie yelled over the radio, his voice cracking with urgency. I turned the steering wheel, feeling the tires skid on the loose earth. Other trucks did the same, scattering like a school of fish fleeing a predator. But we weren't fish. We were slow, heavy targets, loaded with thousands of liters of highly flammable fuel. If a bomb hit us, there would be nothing to bury. The Stukas came in low, strafing the column. I could hear their distinctive whistle, a sound the Germans designed specifically to terrify. It worked. My stomach churned, my hands trembled on the steering wheel, but I didn't stop, I couldn't. Stopping meant dying. When the attack ended, 3 trucks had been destroyed. 7 men were dead. One of them was Tommy Washington, from Mississippi. He was 19. He talked about his girlfriend waiting for him at home, about how he was going to get married as soon as he got back. I helped him load his truck that morning. 4 hours later, I helped him bury it in a ditch on the side of the French road. That night, sitting in the darkness, my body still shaking with adrenaline, I understood. This wasn't about liberation. It was about survival, and the Germans weren't going to make it easy. George S. Patton Jr. was a force of nature. You didn't need to see him to know when he was near. The very air seemed to turn electric. I saw him once, surveying our lines. Tall, his polished helmet gleaming in the sun. ivory pistol slung at his hips like a Wild West gunslinger. He stared at our column of trucks with the intensity of a man assessing weapons of war, because that's exactly what we were to him. "You are the arteries of this army," he said, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Without blood, the heart stops. Without you, my tanks are useless metal sculptures. Do you understand that?" We understood, perhaps better than he imagined. Patton's Third Army was a war machine unlike anything the Germans had ever seen. He didn't believe in slow, methodical advance. He believed in speed, in momentum, in breaking through enemy lines before they could reorganize. L'audace, l'audace, toujours l'audace. Boldness, boldness, always boldness. That was his mantra. But boldness consumes fuel, and ammunition, and spare parts, and food. An M4 Sherman tank drank nearly 200 liters of gasoline every 100 kilometers. Multiply that by hundreds of tanks. Add the jeeps, the transport trucks, the half-tracks. Patton's Third Army consumed resources like a dragon consumed villages in ancient tales. And guess who fed the dragon? In July 1944, we were still laying the groundwork. The Normandy ports were congested, ships waiting to unload, supplies piled on the beaches, mile-long lines of vehicles trying to retrieve their cargo. The system was an organized and poorly organized chaos. Each day, the distance between the ports and the front grew. Each day, the challenge grew greater. That's when Red Ball Express was born. The name came from the railways. Red Ball was the term for priority express trains that didn't stop for anything. And that's exactly what we would be. Dedicated routes, absolute priority, constant movement. From the beaches of Normandy to the front, advancing through France. No stops, no detours, no excuses. "You will drive these routes 24 hours a day," explained Colonel Ross, a thin man with sunken eyes that seemed to carry the weight of all Allied logistics. "You will drive without lights at night to avoid bombing. You will drive under fire if necessary. And you will deliver. Because if you don't, men die, simple as that. Simple, clear. They gave us maps marked with red lines, our sacred routes. No civilian vehicles allowed. No non-essential military traffic. Just us, the trucks, and the road. Thousands of tons of supplies moving in an endless river of steel and rubber. I looked at Jimmy that first night before we started. "Do you think we can do this?" He smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man preparing to jump off a cliff. "We have no choice, brother. Patton's out there waiting for his fuel, and we're going to take him if it's the last thing we do." I didn't know then how prophetic those words were. Across the lines in the German headquarters retreating across France, other men studied other maps. Generals who had conquered half the world, who had crushed armies in weeks, who had rewritten the textbooks of military tactics. They looked at Patton's advances and didn't panic. They felt confidence. General Oberst von Kluge, commander of Army Group B, pointed to the American supply lines stretched across the map like exposed veins. "He's moving too fast. Much faster than his supply lines can sustain." The officers around the table agreed. The math was simple, brutal, and indisputable. The Normandy ports were more than 400 kilometers from the front. Every kilometer meant more fuel wasted simply transporting supplies. The Americans had destroyed the French railways with their own bombardments. Now they were reaping the consequences. Only the roads remained. "Our intelligence confirms it," Major Dietrich said, adjusting his glasses as he read the reports. "The Americans can, at most, move 6,000 tons of supplies per day by road. Patton's Third Army consumes almost 8,000 tons per day when fully operational. The math doesn't lie, gentlemen. It will stop. It has to stop." Von Kluge lit a cigarette, letting the smoke rise slowly. He had fought on the Eastern Front, had seen what happened when supply lines broke. He had seen entire divisions starve to death in the Russian winter, tanks abandoned for lack of fuel, soldiers eating dead horses to survive. He knew the logistics of war as well as he knew tactics. "Then we reorganize," he said finally. "We prepare a solid defensive line. When Patton stops, and he will, we counterattack. His tanks will be out of fuel, his soldiers out of supplies. It will be a massacre." It was a good plan, a solid plan, based on real intelligence, ruthless mathematics, and decades of military experience. There was just one problem. They didn't know us. They didn't know the thousands of men, mostly black, most from the poor American South, most invisible to the history books, who were about to rewrite the rules of logistics warfare. They didn't know the drivers who would drive 36 hours straight, chewing caffeine pills and singing to keep their eyes open. They didn't know the mechanics who would fix engines by the roadside by flashlight. They didn't know the sergeants like Mackenzie, who would lead through hell with unwavering determination. And they definitely didn't know about Red Ball Express. The first race began on August 25, 1944. I remember the date because it was the day Paris was liberated. While soldiers paraded down the Champs-Élysées and crowds wept with joy, we were on the country roads, loading our trucks with drums of fuel. My truck carried 150 20-liter drums, 3,000 liters of high-octane aviation gasoline. If a spark struck them, I would instantly vaporize. The thought should have terrified me. Strangely, it no longer did. You get used to the idea of death when it becomes your constant traveling companion. Ready, gentlemen? Mackenzie walked along the column, checking each truck. He tapped the side of mine. How's the engine? Purring like a kitten, Sergeant. Kittens don't purr at 90 miles an hour carrying 3 tons of liquid explosive, soldier. Then purr like a lion, Sergeant. He almost smiled. Almost. Keep your eyes on the road. Stay away from the truck in front. If it blows up, I need you to still be able to continue. Understood? Yes, Sergeant. It was 6 p.m. when we set off. The plan was to drive at night, when German bombers would have the hardest time finding us. Of course, driving at night meant driving in the dark, lights off, relying only on moonlight and memory of the roads. It meant seeing the world in shades of gray, where every shadow could be a bomb crater and every curve could be your last. The columns stretched for miles, hundreds of trucks moving in convoy, maintaining precise distances. From the air, we must have looked like a metal serpent slithering across the French landscape. I wondered if the Germans saw us. If they were up there watching, planning. The first few hours were tense but peaceful. I drove mechanically, shifting gears by the sound of the engine, feeling the road through the steering wheel. Jimmy was 3 trucks ahead. I could occasionally see the silhouette of his truck against the dimly lit sky. Then I heard over the radio, "Air contact, all trucks, disperse immediately." I repeat, disperse immediately. My heart raced. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. But I was already reacting before I could even process the fear. Steering off the road, seeking cover, turning off the engine to reduce noise and heat. The planes passed overhead. They didn't see us, or they did, but they had bigger targets. We waited 20 minutes in the silent darkness, each man alone with his thoughts and fears. Then Mackenzie gave the signal, "Continue," and we continue. We arrived at the drop-off point at 3 a.m., a forward depot 50 kilometers behind the front lines. Exhausted soldiers were quickly unloading the drums, arranging them in neat stacks. A young lieutenant with sunken eyes and dirt on his face shook my hand. "Thank you," he said simply. "The tanks have been idle for 2 days. You just saved our offensive." I didn't know what to say, I just waved. But as I drove back, the empty truck now bouncing over the bumps in the road, I felt something different. It wasn't pride exactly. It was purpose. For the first time since enlisting, I felt like I was actually making a difference. And that was just the beginning. September arrived with rain and blood. The roads we traveled turned into rivers of mud. The Germans, realizing they couldn't stop us directly, changed tactics. They began mining the roads, bombing bridges, and booby-trapping the convoys. Every kilometer became a deadly lottery. I lost count of how many trips I took. 10? 20? 50? The days bled into each other, a grey eternity of steering wheel, engine roaring, eyes burning. We slept in 3-hour shifts when we were lucky. We ate cold rations while driving. The world was reduced to load, drive, unload, return, repeat. Jimmy began to change. We all did. The Detroit kid who cracked jokes and whistled oldies disappeared, replaced by a hollow-eyed man who spoke only when necessary. I saw him one night sitting in the back of his truck, holding a family photo. His hands were shaking. "Are you okay?" I asked. It took him a long time to answer. "Have you ever thought that maybe we won't get back together? That maybe this is our life now until it ends?" I had no answer, because I thought the same thing every night, but Mackenzie held us together. He was the thread that kept us from falling apart completely. When men began to break, and they all did eventually, he was there. Not with comforting words or false promises, just with a solid, unwavering presence. "Do you know why we do this?" he said one night, gathering the company around a low fire. "It's not for glory. God knows we won't get any. It's not for recognition. No one will remember our names. We do it because the men at the front depend on us, because every drum of fuel we deliver is another tank that can advance. Every box of ammunition is another chance for someone to survive. You are invisible, but you are indispensable. Never forget that. Simple words, but enough to make us pick up our keys again the next morning. Somewhere in a German headquarters, the numbers made no sense. Impossible, Major Dietrich repeated, leafing through intelligence reports with growing frustration. Our calculations were accurate. The Americans shouldn't be able to transport more than 6,000 tons per day, 7,000 at most if they're lucky. The reports on his desk told a different story. German observers recorded endless convoys on the roads. Aerial reconnaissance captured long lines of trucks even during bombing raids. American prisoners spoke of 20-hour shifts, drivers driving until they passed out, mechanics repairing vehicles by the roadside under artillery fire. They are transporting between 9,000 and 12,000 tons daily, an intelligence official reported, confirmed by multiple sources. Von Klug studied the maps with a grim expression. Patton's advances hadn't stopped. If anything, they had accelerated. His armored divisions were now almost to the Moselle River. Cities the Germans had hoped to defend for weeks fell in days. How? Von Kluge asked, the question hanging in the air like battle smoke. No one had an answer. Because the answer defied conventional military logic. The Americans weren't playing by the established rules. They were improvising, adapting, sacrificing. They were putting men in trucks and making them drive beyond any reasonable human limit. They were using us. We must cut these supply lines, Von Klug decided. Intensified bombing, priority targets, transport convoys. If we can't stop Patton directly, we'll starve him out. The order was issued, and the hell on the road got even worse. It was September 12th when everything almost fell apart. The convoy had 200 trucks. I was in the middle of the column, Jimmy was in front. We were carrying a mixed cargo, fuel, ammunition, spare parts. The sun was setting, turning the French sky blood red. The Stukas came from the sun. Classic German tactic, using the glare to blind observers. I didn't see them until they were already diving, their sirens screaming that sound designed to freeze the blood. The first bomb hit the front of the column. The explosion was so violent that I felt the shockwave inside the cabin, 200 meters away. Flames rose into the sky, black and orange, turning the dusk into a false dawn of horror. "Disperse, disperse," the radio screamed. I turned the wheel, but the road was congested. Trucks slammed into each other, drivers desperately trying to get out of the line of death. Another Stuka dove, strafing the column. I saw holes appear in the hood of the truck in front of me, glass exploding, the driver falling sideways. I didn't think. I reacted. I stepped on the accelerator, steered my truck into the ditch beside the road. The fall was violent. I hit my head on the roof, felt something crack in my back, but I was alive and off the road. The Stukas continued. 5 minutes that felt like 5 hours. Bombs falling, machine guns singing, men screaming. I crouched inside the cockpit, hands on my head, praying to gods I wasn't sure I believed in. When it finally stopped, the silence was worse than the noise. That heavy, dead silence that only exists after many people have just died. I staggered out of the truck. The road was a graveyard of twisted metal, trucks overturned, burning, bodies strewn about, supplies scattered like macabre confetti, cans of food, ammunition casings, engine parts mixed with blood and dirt. "Jimmy!" I yelled, running to the front of the column. "Jimmy!" I found his truck. It was on its side in the ditch, the windshield shattered. He was hanging by his seatbelt, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. "Jimmy, Jimmy, look at me." My hands shook as I unbuckled him from the belt. His eyes opened, glassy, confused, but alive. I'm okay. I'm okay." He wasn't there. None of us were, but we were alive. Mackenzie appeared, limping, his uniform torn and bloodied. "Report," he ordered, his voice still steady despite the destruction around him. The numbers came in. 23 trucks destroyed, 18 men dead, 42 injured. "What now?" someone asked, their voice breaking. Mackenzie looked at the carnage, at the dirty, bloodied survivors, at the remaining trucks. Then he looked east, to where the front waited, to where men depended on us. "Now," he said, "now we take what's left and carry on, because that's what we do." And that's what we did. The Germans celebrated. Reports of the convoy attack reached headquarters with morbid satisfaction. 23 trucks destroyed, supplies lost, and the line cut for hours. Keep it up, von Kluge ordered. Every convoy destroyed buys us time to fortify, to bring in reinforcements, to prepare the counter-offensive. But something was happening that they didn't see. Something their spies weren't reporting because it wasn't a physical change. It was a change of spirit. We got angrier. I buried 3 friends after that attack. Men with whom I had shared meals, laughter and fears. I laid them in the cold, damp French earth, and something inside me hardened. It wasn't hatred exactly. It was pure determination, crystallized into diamond. Did they want to stop us? Let them try. The Red Ball Express didn't slow down. It accelerated. Captains began approving even longer shifts. Mechanics learned to repair engines in half the time. Drivers learned to drive with one eye on the sky and one foot on the accelerator. And we started delivering more, much more. September 15th, 8,500 tons delivered. September 18th, 19,200 tons. September 22, 10,300 tons. The numbers mounted. The impossible math became reality. And at the front, Patton's tanks wouldn't stop. They couldn't. We wouldn't let them. Jimmy started driving again 3 days after the attack, still with bandages on his head. I can't sit still, he said when I suggested he rest. If I sit still, I think. And if I think, I remember. I'd rather drive. I understood. The steering wheel was our therapy. The engine, our meditation. While we drove, we had purpose. While we delivered, we had meaning. Mackenzie began to lead in ways that went beyond orders. He drove the lead truck in the most dangerous stretches. When there wasn't enough food, he ate last. When a man broke down, and eventually they all did, he was there not with judgment but with understanding. Courage isn't about not being afraid, he told me one night. It's about being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. And you, boys, you're the bravest men I've ever met. Coming from a World War I veteran, that meant something. Late September, the Germans had established a solid defensive line along the Moselle River. It was their last chance. If Patton crossed, the road to Germany was open. They concentrated everything there: artillery, tanks, veteran infantry. It would be the battle that would decide the fate of the campaign. And Patton was out of fuel. How much do we have? He demanded to know at a staff meeting. Enough for 3 days of limited operations, General. Maybe 5 if we economize. Patton pounded the table. Limited? Limited? We don't do limited. I need an all-out offensive. I need to crush that line before they fortify themselves further. General, supply lines are at their limit. We're asking the impossible of drivers. Then ask for the impossible, Patton thundered. Those men can do the impossible. I know they can. Get me my fuel. The order came to us like a tsunami. Maximum operations. All trucks available. All routes open. Objective: 12,500 tons delivered in 48 hours. 12,500 tons. It was madness. It was logistical suicide. We can do it, Mackenzie said as he gathered us together. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with fierce determination. I know we're exhausted. I know some of you are wounded. I know we've all seen too much. But this is it. This is the moment. If we deliver these tons, Patton breaks that line. If we fail, men die waiting for supplies that never arrive. So what will it be? No one said anything for a long moment. Then Jimmy stood up. I'll go. Another man stood up. Me too. Then another and another. Until we all stood, a company of broken but not defeated men, ready to do the impossible one last time. I didn't sleep for 2 days. No one slept. We drove, unloaded, returned, loaded, drove again. The world became a blur of road, steering wheel, engine, repeat. My body began to shut down. Hallucinations appeared at the edges of my vision, moving shadows, voices that weren't there. Once, I swore I saw my mother standing by the side of the road, waving. I blinked and she was gone. Caffeine pills, cold water on the face, screaming to stay awake. Whatever it took. The Germans bombed relentlessly. We lost more trucks, more men. But others picked up cargo from the destroyed vehicles and continued. Nothing stopped. We couldn't stop. I've seen a driver continue driving with a broken arm, using only his good hand on the steering wheel. I've seen a mechanic replace a complete engine in 45 minutes, a job that normally took 4 hours. I've seen men push trucks with blown tires, miles on their wheels, leaving sparks on the road. It was madness. It was magnificent. It was terrible and beautiful and impossible, and it was happening. On the second night, my engine overheated. Black smoke poured from the hood. I knew what it meant. A blown head gasket. Hours-long repair. "Leave him alone," a sergeant from another platoon shouted. "Get another truck." But there was no other truck. Everyone was on the road. It was this one or nothing. Jimmy appeared with a can of water. "We'll figure it out." We improvised a temporary fix, sealing it with soap, cooling it with cold water, praying it would hold. 20 minutes later, I was back on the road, the engine humming unevenly, but moving. "How much longer?" I asked over the radio. 12 hours, Mackenzie replied. "We're at 11,000 tons. We need 1,500 more. 1,500 tons. 50 full trucks." We still had 70 in operation. We could do it. September 28th, 5 a.m. I arrived at the outpost with my last load. Bald tires, smoking engine, body a wreck. But I arrived. Soldiers unloaded frantically. Sherman tanks lined up, crews ready, just waiting for the fuel to roar back to life. "You did it," the same young lieutenant from weeks ago told me. He didn't look so young now. None of us did. "You got the 12,500 tons. Patton is launching the offensive in an hour." I didn't have the energy to respond. I just nodded and slumped against the truck. Across the lines at German headquarters, von Kluge received the first reports with disbelief. "Massive tank movement, hundreds of vehicles, they must have no fuel." "Confirmed, sir. The Americans," they continued. Their convoys did not stop. Von Kluge felt his stomach sink. The math had failed. The intelligence had failed. They had underestimated not American capability, but American will. The sheer, brutal determination of ordinary men doing extraordinary things. "Brace for impact," he ordered, his voice hollow. "And God help us all." At 6 a.m. the roar began. Hundreds of Sherman engines revving simultaneously. The sound was like continuous thunder, like the end of the world itself arriving on steel tracks. I was there. I watched the tanks advance, an irresistible wave of metal and fire, and I thought of every mile I'd driven, every bomb I'd survived, every friend I'd buried. It had all led to this. The German line on the Moselle, so carefully built, so resolutely defended, shattered in 36 hours. Patton had advanced 80 miles in a single day. 80 miles. The Germans retreated in panic, their defenses crumbling not because they were not brave, but because they could not fight an enemy that simply refused to stop. And we, the invisible drivers, watched from the rear. We had done this, not with battlefield bravery, not with headline-grabbing heroism, but with quiet determination, mile after mile, ton after ton. The war didn't end that day. It continued for another 8 bloody months until the German surrender in May 1945, and we kept driving. The Red Ball Express operated until November 1944, transporting over 400,000 tons of supplies in total. But something had changed. The generals began to understand. Victories weren't decided solely by brilliant tactics or brave soldiers. They were decided by men in the trucks, on the docks, in the kitchens, in the medical stations, by the invisible structure that kept armies functioning. I returned home in 1946. Alabama hadn't changed much. Same poverty, same prejudice, same closed doors. But I had changed. I had seen the world. I had proven myself. I had carried an army on my back. Jimmy came back too. She got a job at Ford again, got married, and had 3 children. We wrote to each other occasionally. Her letters never mentioned the war directly, but I could read between the lines. The nightmares, the memories, the weight we both carried. Mackenzie never returned. He died in a truck accident in October 1944, a month before the end of the Red Ball Express. He'd been driving for 40 hours without sleep when he went off the road. They told me it was instantaneous. I hope so. He deserved peace. I see him sometimes, on the edges of my memory, standing beside his truck, checking the engines, watching over his men. "You are the bravest men I've ever met," he'd say. And I finally believe him. History remembers Patton. It remembers the Sherman tanks thundering across Europe. It remembers the great battles, the brilliant generals, the decisive moments. He doesn't remember much about us. The 75% black drivers of the Red Ball Express. The men who drove without recognition, who died without headlines, who changed the course of the war without ever firing a shot. But I remember. And now you know. German arrogance wasn't underestimating American capabilities. It was underestimating what ordinary men will do when everything depends on them. It was believing that mathematics mattered more than human will. It was forgetting that, in modern warfare, he who controls the road controls the destination. The German generals predicted that Patton would stop. They were right to predict. Logic dictated it. They were wrong not to count on us, on our stubbornness, our refusal to accept the impossible. We delivered 12,500 tons when they said 6,000 was the maximum. And in doing so, we changed not just a battle, but the very nature of war. Because in the end, it wasn't the tanks that won. It was the trucks. It was the men behind the wheels, invisible but indispensable, silent but victorious. And that's the story that needs to be told.